exercise lasting up to 90 minutes daily from 5 a.m. to 6 p.m. The wearing of masks covering the nose and mouth is mandatory, and there is a fine of $2,500 per infraction. That is when you're outside of your residence. Mask wearing is mandatory. I reiterate that, and that is in the regulations in Clause 4 for those who have not seen it, and Clause 11 talks about the fines. The police have been tasked with monitoring this because of the safety of the population and your own safety. Also, the borders are being monitored, and this is necessary so that we can keep from illegal entry, because regulations also state that the persons can leave, but no persons can come in to Anguilla. And these regulations are in place for the next 2 weeks to May 6th. Certainly, that's in the first instance, and depending on our public health situation, can be extended. I just want to state unequivocally that this is a serious situation. This is a health emergency. Do not take this lightly. We want to make sure that we contain this and look out for the health of our people, which has always been paramount. And so what I'd like to do now is to turn over to the Permanent Secretary and Chief Medical Officer to bring us up to date, make their statements, and then we can continue the press conference. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, and good morning to all. I'm Dr. Aisha Andrin, Chief Medical Officer. Since yesterday's press release, which was current up to 3 p.m., we had an additional 9 positive cases confirmed. Thus far, all individuals including cluster and the primary secondary contacts of cases. So that brings us to 37 positive cases up to this morning. The contact tracing and the surveillance are ongoing, so that number is expected to change, and so on. So conversely,
Dr. Andrew?
okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, you're clear now. Yes, yes. Go ahead.
So I'm not sure which part you missed, so let me pull up this page again. So yes, the correction from yesterday's press release, the 7-month-old baby was not hospitalized in the end. So the decision was made to treat on an outpatient basis, so that's good news. So the baby was able to go home. Additionally, looking at, somebody asked the question, how many of these persons were vaccinated compared to those who were not vaccinated among the positives versus the negatives? Let me just state that in terms of looking at complete vaccination, no persons were fully vaccinated in the sense of having had both doses and then the 3 weeks subsequent to that to consider yourself fully vaccinated. However, that said, up to yesterday's screening of 180 persons, of those persons, 106 of those who tested negative had at least 1 dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine. 24 of those had the second dose as well. That's compared to, out of the 37 positive cases up to yesterday, 5 of them had 1 dose, and only 2 of them had 2 doses. Looking at the registered persons on the portal, to date we have 7,152 persons registered on the portal. 6,290 persons have received their first dose. 1,572 persons have received their second doses. So I'll pause to emphasize the fact that in the UK, in terms of vaccination, we spoke with the counterparts on Friday, and they're seeing a whopping 65% reduction in transmission of virus with a first dose, and onwards 80 to 90% of reduction of transmission with the second dose. I'm saying that further to the person's question, the evidence is out there because we keep saying vaccination is our way out of this. The evidence is out there and it is compelling, and it's already seeing allusions of that even with our cohort and our present cluster situation, looking at the proportion of those who are vaccinated among those who tested negative compared to those who have tested positive. So we're just putting that there. Again, the robust evidence coming out of the UK, we don't need to create the data. The data is there for us to see. So when we say vaccination is the way out, that is what we are saying, and we cannot emphasize that too much, right? Another point I would like to clarify, testing and the surveillance is absolutely free. This is a public good. We are looking to contain this cluster. No one is being charged for this test. What happened in the last couple of days that may have caused some confusion, you had persons coming to test for onward travel as usual. Those persons did have to pay a fee. However, I repeat, in this public health investigation, nobody is being charged, and we're urging persons to come forward to be tested so we can know the extent of it. So again, we urge a full speed vaccination. We continue to collate information and we'll try to update you in a timely manner as possible. We need to get this under control. I think one of the most important things, in addition to the mandate of masks, is to stay home and to restrict movement for persons to comply with the measures that are being put in place now to contain the situation as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Andrin. This is Foster Rogers, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Health. I won't add much to what Dr. Andrin has said, but I'll simply reiterate the issue of moving about in Anguilla at this point in time. There is no need for persons to move around Anguilla if it is not for essential purposes. And those three essential purposes are, well, we have we gave the press release yesterday indicating why and how you should move about. The regulations are also on our website as to the conditions under which you can move about for doctor's appointments, for go to grocery shopping, banking facilities, and these type of things. Even for those activities, if you do not have to leave, do not leave your house. The regulations are quite clear. In fact, there are more stringent measures the Ministry of Health can put in place, both under the Public Health Act and under the Constitution in terms of emergency orders, but we do not want to go there if we do not have to. I'm saying this because we know about disease causation, and we know how disease can spread. The way of dealing with this is through isolation and stopping the spread from one household to the next, from one person to the next. And the only way to do this is to remain isolated or in quarantine. So we're asking for the support of the public. We have gone an entire year with just about 30 cases over a year, with the exception of one. All of these 29 cases were imported cases. Within 2 days, we have seen how quickly this stuff can get around. So we're asking now that you step up to the plate, that we recognize that this is a public health emergency, and that we recognize that we have to get this thing under control. We can and we will if people cooperate, if people stay off the streets, and if those persons who have tested positive isolate. If those persons who are testing negative, but you still have been told to isolate, you have to isolate, because as I have been preaching for the last year, if you are exposed, there is no way we can tell that you're positive on the first day of exposure. It is just not possible. The viral load in your body is just not high enough for any test available now to test positivity. So those persons who have been tested negative, but who have been told to isolate, have been told to quarantine, please stay in isolation and quarantine until you are cleared either by a second test or after you finish your quarantine period. So this is some very important information we get out there. Positive persons must isolate immediately, but those negative persons who have been told not to leave, but to still quarantine, must remain in quarantine, must remain isolated until they are cleared by the health team through either a second test or through the end of quarantine. So we don't want you to feel as if a negative test is simply a license to get up and wrong in Anguilla move about, you would have been advised by the health team whether to stay put or not. And we're asking you to please cooperate with the health team to ensure that we get this thing under control. It is a small community, and we have to ensure that we get under control rather quickly. Thank you very much.
Yeah, the only thing I want to add and to emphasize is that we are pressing forward with vaccination. We want to see that persons run with that as well. That's the only legitimate and other activity we'd like to see go full speed ahead. You would have noted that we have moved the vaccination site to the football stadium, so it's outdoors. We'll be practicing physical distancing and mask wearing, but that is one activity that needs to go on urgently.
I just want to continue the restrictions here. Thank the health team, thank CMO, Dr. Andrewen, and Permanent Secretary Foster Rogers, who continues to work tirelessly, even though his voice is not as perfect. It just shows that this dedication and this commitment to keeping Anguilla safe, and we just can beg the people to follow suit. I mean, throughout the year, it has been emphasized that the way that we were going to get in trouble in Anguilla is the possibility of illegal entry, the possibility of breaches of protocol, and it seems that that is what has caused this. So, as was stated and reiterated, stay home unless you have to go out for an essential purpose. And the police will be monitoring and fines will be given, including the chance of imprisonment for 6 months or more. So non-essential workplaces will close. That includes, bars, nightclubs. Don't hang out on the strip. The closure of churches and schools. Restaurants, other food establishments for takeout services only. And social and physical distancing is required if you have to pick up food. The closure of ports, as I said earlier, to incoming passengers. Outgoing movements are permitted. Restriction on visitors to residential facilities such as the elderly care homes, the prison, Zenada Haven, and also to the hospital, unless it is, allowed. Visitation to the hospital has been restricted. So these are the things that we want to put in place to curb the spread, and so that we can get past this. And now some people are asking the difference between a cluster and community spread. If Dr. Andrewen is still on, I'd ask her to address that because that seems to be a concern to some people. Dr. Andrewen?
Yes, certainly. As we said before, you can think of the cluster as maybe like a step for community spread. And community spread has 4 levels, 1 through 4, 1 being the least and 4 being the worst in terms of the extent of community spread. The difference between cluster and community spread is the link. With the cluster, we are seeing a common exposure settings. So you can still get a sense of where your cases might be. You can still, you're in a better position to contact trace. You have linkages still. You still have some more degree of containment than with community spread, in which you have no links. You just have cases popping up all over the place. You don't know who was in contact with whom. And then, of course, up to a level 4, you're talking about rampant infection, rampant disease all over your community. So those are the major differences between the cluster and the community spread. So once again, if we do this right, we're doing aggressive contact tracing, but in the background of that, we're also asking the general public to comply with the measures and so on, so that we can contain, so we do not progress to any kind of community transmission. So that is why it's extremely important for us to get this right in these next 2 weeks.
Thank you, Dr. Andrewen. I'll ask Kenneth if there are any questions.
Yes, Premier. One of the questions online is government considering a full lockdown as in the BVI?
I'm going to ask PS to answer that one right now.
Sure. Thank you, Premier. We are assessing the matter right now. In fact, that is right now in a discussion between myself, the Premier, the Attorney General, and the other levels of the health team. It all depends on the continued spread. As the Chief Medical Officer indicated just now, we still can identify the exposures. We know where the exposures were. We have identified them, and they're still linked to all of the positive cases so far have been linked to those exposures. That's why we are calling it still a cluster. If it comes to a point where we can no longer identify the exposures, where certainly there may be secondary, tertiary exposures that we cannot identify, then more than likely we'll have to go to a ratcheted level of containment. But as of this point in time, that's why we're asking persons to stay off the street. We're asking persons to stay contained, because when you do measures like curfew and so forth, it has to be able to stand muster constitutionally. You just cannot jump to curfew if you do not have the reasons to jump to curfew. And we've always been advised this way, because you have to be very measured in the way you limit people's liberty. So we are asking persons that as of now, as of today, we are not considering curfew, but we're asking persons to comply with the measures so that we do not have to get at that level. But if we have to get to that level, we definitely will get to that level, because at the end of the day, this is a public health emergency.
Another question before we go to our media personnel. What about the construction industry? Is that allowed to continue working?
Yes, the construction industry is considered essential service for a couple of reasons. There are quite a few of essential structures that have been done, schools, hospitals, other health facilities and so forth, that need to be completed. Certainly, in particular with the health facilities, you need these facilities completed in the middle of a pandemic, where you want to not only treat people in a hospital setting, but treat people in an outpatient primary health care setting as well. So yes, with regard to other essential services such as banking, food services, groceries and so forth, construction is also an essential service because of the critical importance to the pandemic and to the health services and to other critical services in the country.
Thank you very much. We are across to Anguilla and Felicia Hennis.
Before that, I see a question online that has been forwarded as to what variant is present in Anguilla. We don't know at the moment. We are sending those specimens for testing and genomic sequencing on Monday. That will be handled by CARFA. They will send it on to the University of the West Indies, so we should have that information within the next few days.
Thank you very much. So we go across now to Felicia Hennis, Radio Anguilla.
Good morning. Dr. Enjoying in your data that you just presented in terms of the new statistics, does those numbers include any additional children?
No, they don't. More children.
Oh, I'm not sure of my connection. I'm not hearing her too clearly.
No, they're all adults. New cases are all adults.
Oh, all adults.
Yes.
Okay. The release said basically based on what you're seeing, this is a result of illegal re-entry. Is there any sign or evidence of human trafficking?
I would say no, not from our investigations and our interviews, no.
Okay. In your conversations with these persons, have a core group of persons been selected who were really the instigators going overseas? Was it Justin Martin, or were they going further afield?
Well, I think we're putting a lot of, we have to be very careful about the things we purport. I'm not sure, instigator, I'm not sure. We go look, we're a public health agency. We're not like police or detectives, so we look in terms of possible source of infection and entry of the virus. So our question was quite along those lines, if you know what I mean. So I would step away from.
So no, what I would say from a public health standpoint, we are not going to get involved in the criminal issues or the issues of illegal entry that will be dealt with from a law enforcement standpoint. We, as the Ministry of Health, we're not getting to that at all. We will not even say at this point in time who the persons are, because we do not deal with individuals. As a public health agency, we deal with groups and persons in groups. So at the end of the period, we will not get involved into who it was and these type of things. But what we will say is that our investigations have indicated that yes, this stuff was as a result of illegal reentry.
Okay, thank you so much.
And someone asked about the COVID hotlines, and those numbers are 476-7627. That is 476-SOAP, SOAP, or 584-425. That is 584-4263, 584-HAND, HAND, or you can go to the www.beatcovid19.ai. But those two lines can call. There's also a line if you've been vaccinated and have any side effects or adverse reactions, 235-4357 or 235-HELP, HELP. Any other questions, Minister Hodge?
Yes. So we go across to Dawn Hodge of the Herald newspaper. Dawn.
Good morning. This is Dawn. This question is for Dr. Andron. Could you please just restate the numbers that you gave at the beginning of your presentation? My sound was breaking up, and I want to be sure that what I wrote down is correct.
Okay, so as of this morning, you could say 8 o'clock, we had screened 286 persons.
Okay.
Of these, we have confirmed 37 positive cases.
Okay, and you also indicated that some of those, I believe a total of 7, had been vaccinated. I think you said 5 had gotten their initial and 2 had gotten both. Is that correct?
I'm saying it was, out of those who have tested negative, 106 of them had at least had one dose, first dose of the vaccine. And 24 of those who tested negative had the second dose. Nobody in this cohort so far has completed vaccination in the sense that they have the 2 doses and the 3 weeks that need to elapse before you can consider yourself vaccinated. Enough time for the vaccine to kick in, right? That said, conversely, 5 of the positive cases had had at least 1 dose, and 2 have had at least 2 doses, or the 2 doses.
Great. And I have one follow-on question. You later on talked about how urgent it was for the entire population to be vaccinated. And I'm just wondering if there's any thought being given to either extending the vaccination hours or possibly another day. I know the staff is busy and overworked, but just a question.
Certainly, these are things we consider constantly, and we'll have another meeting with the vaccination team shortly as well. And while I have the mic, right, I want to address a statement that was made about community testing, and I think that's a bit of a misconception. Previous to COVID, we have what you call community communicable disease surveillance, right? So persons come with a constellation of symptoms and you test them. So that has been going on. That said, since the pandemic started, a phenomenon that has been seen across the Caribbean and a couple of countries in the world as well. They had seen a reduction in persons presenting with respiratory tract infection-like symptoms. Once persons present, just like before COVID time, we do swabbing and we try to establish the etiology. So yes, we have been testing people in the community for COVID, right? What you have seen more in the media, naturally, is when we get our imported cases, because that was our source of entry. We didn't have COVID circulating in the community, so it stands to reason that you would not have been seeing that play up in the media, right? When we got positive cases, up to now, invariably it was imported cases, so that's why we were not making a lot of noise that way. We're looking at opening the border, getting the economy back, and so on. So when we spoke in terms of positive cases, by and large, it would have been these imported cases. But that's not to say we weren't testing. And remember as well, for persons going on for onward travel, they were also getting COVID-19 tests. And there are a few hundred of those by now.
Thank you.
So we have a question. Is there any evidence that the bubble could have been compromised as well?
No, as the press release said, we're just pointing in another direction, not the bubble breach or any activities there related to bubble.
And a follow-up question. First of all, this person said it's a great job thus far. I understand that due to medical legal purposes, names of positive persons will not be released, though some may have been placed on social media. Will it be beneficial to advise the public where the hotspot or cluster event was, so that persons would know if they were at the event place, they should come forward to be tested?
Well, you're right. There's always that delicate balance in terms of confidentiality and what the public needs to know. We have to do something in between in the health field, and we've reached out to the proprietors of those places and done the contact tracing that way, as well as speaking to the cases themselves, and that takes the need for people to be forthcoming and to explain the nature of their contacts and so on. What is also playing out, we're in a small community. There's a lot of information out there where these exposures might be, but we will just go a step short of revealing that kind of information. We have to be extremely careful. But in terms of the contact tracing, we are using the proprietors of these places, the cases themselves, and all the informants around that, reaching out to people through that means. What you hear through the grapevine and so on, if it's viable and you're able to confirm the information, we will not necessarily discourage that, but we will have to tread lightly and in terms of looking at confidentiality issues and so on going forward. So that is our challenge in terms of privacy and information and what we need to know and what we are liberated to put out in the public domain. It's always a tricky balance.
If I can just step in here a bit, the Ministry of Health is very careful with regard to how it deals with people's confidential information. We certainly are the holders of a lot of information of persons, health and otherwise, and we tread very carefully how we deal with this. As of now, I can categorically state that no name of any positive person that's in the public domain has come from the Ministry of Health. And I say this because there's quite a lot of people out there who are intimating that they're professionals in the Ministry of Health who have breached confidentiality, who have put their information out there. This is not the case. The Public of Anguilla has been working with us now for over a year, and you know how we function at the Ministry of Health level. And I have said on more than one occasion, in public health, we deal with groups, we deal with trends, we deal with how disease spread. We do not deal with giving people's personal information out to the public. We only do that to the persons themselves and for them to get proper care. But when it comes to making decisions on public health matters, we look at the overall impact of the community. So I want people, and it's a balance we have to make because we think it's important that we get the correct information out there while at the same time protecting people's health and health information. Like the CMO said, it is a balance, but it is a necessary balance that we have to maintain.
I think I'm getting a question about how we're urging persons to vaccinate without knowing their COVID-19 status, because we've said previously that if you have been diagnosed with COVID, according to guidance and so on, you wait until you convalesce. It's usually 4 weeks later, either from the onset of symptoms or from your positive test. The main reason for that stipulation was so that you don't confuse the symptoms of the COVID virus with any adverse reaction from the vaccine, right? That said, what we're doing, two things are running. An aggressive investigation into a cluster, right? And through which we are rapidly identifying cases, and the contact investigation will continue. So we are hoping in the next few days we have this picture, we know who is positive and so on. At the same time, we're saying persons should get vaccinated, right? So you, by and large, should be identified through this contact investigation if you are a contact of any of these cases, but the rest of the public will need to go and get vaccinated. So we're trying to run two things. It's always a balance, and I think it's a very good strategy. And remember that the main concern was being the confusion of symptoms between COVID-19 and vaccination. That's also much more of a consideration for countries with widespread community transmission. That said, there's not routine testing for persons, even in these countries. They don't test you to see if you have the virus before they give the vaccine. It's a general sort of guidance and say, okay, if you've just been diagnosed, hold off a few weeks, right? So once again, aggressive contact tracing, we're screening a lot of people, we're running a lot of tests every day, with identifying contacts through that means, and that is ongoing. But in the meantime, we also need to ramp up our vaccination coverage because it's being shown in black and white hard data, it drastically reduces the transmission of the virus. So that we will find in the future, after this cluster is over, that we will never have to contemplate another lockdown, that we'll never find ourselves in this position ever again. That's what I'm saying to you.
Yes.
Just to add 1 second, Mr. Hart, just to add to the comment that the Chief Medical Officer just made. For us not to find ourselves in the position again, Anguillans have to be responsible. Anguillans have to really be careful as to how we reintroduce the virus into Anguilla. We do not know what variant this is just yet, but we will find out. I think all of us as responsible citizens of this country must take that responsibility seriously, very seriously. I have been preaching for the last year on press conferences of the risk of illegal entry of the virus. I made that one of my main messages. I preached it for over a year to persons as to the risk that we had, because we knew from a Ministry of Health standpoint that once the protocols for the bubble maintained, and once the people of Anguilla who walked in the bubble were serious about maintaining distances and so forth, the risk of having the virus jump from the bubble to the population was much, much less than the risk of importation, because the bubble basically was a larger quarantine system. I always knew, and we always knew the Ministry of Health, that the greater risk was the importation of the virus through illegal travel. And this certainly is what has happened based on all information that we have. So for it not to happen again, once we get over this, it would mean that people of Anguilla have to put themselves in a position to realize their responsibility, not only to themselves, but to the community at large, to the children of Anguilla, to the elderly of Anguilla, to persons who are at risk, and to persons who have not yet been vaccinated because they cannot be vaccinated. So it is, hopefully this message is not falling on deaf ears, but I think the message has to be greater than simply me. It has to be a situation of let us look out for each other. There's a question that has popped up with regard to how, if we have oxygen and medical provisions and so forth. I can say that we have had the isolation unit in place now for over just about a year. We have used it on different occasions for persons coming back from medical treatment overseas who couldn't quarantine at home and so forth, we need to isolate. And it's ready to, if we need anybody to be put there for in any of these cases. So far, nobody yet has been deemed critical enough to go there, but yes, we do have ventilators and oxygen and everything in place if we have to take persons there. Another question is about a 2-week lockdown. The initial period of 2 weeks is first identified what's happening. Hopefully it won't be more than 2 weeks, but if the persons of Anguilla who are asked to stay home and isolate do not stay home and isolate, and stuff is spread, then certainly more than 2 weeks will be necessary to bring this to an end. But we're hoping that persons can realize that this is critical for us to bring this to an end rather quickly. So we'll make that determination in the next week or thereabout. I won't say much more about that right now. With regard to the mask mandate, right now there is a mask mandate as the Premier indicated in the regulations. Once you leave your home to come to the public, whether you're going to the doctor's office, grocery shopping, vaccination, however essential you go to, once you leave your home, the mandate is now you must have on a mask, and there are fines in the regulations for not having a mask. All of those fines are in the book, and it extends all the way up to 6 months imprisonment. It's necessary for a fine of a couple of $1,000s. So yes, we will be looking at how we proceed over the next 2 weeks in terms of lifting the pause, but we will not be able to make a determination on that right now.
I don't want to follow up and emphasize the PS comments by saying, especially as relates to the isolation unit and our capacity to manage cases, we do not want to have anybody have to be admitted to an isolation unit. We do not want to have anybody placed on a ventilator. Your chances of surviving are substantially reduced, significantly reduced. We do not want to remain in a lockdown indefinitely, and the only way to do that is with persons' cooperation. The fewer cases we have, the less likely that this will go on, and the less likely that you will have persons in that isolation unit. And so that's where we're imploring you to cooperate with us to mitigate against those terrible outcomes.
Okay, so we have a question. How effective is the vaccine if someone does not know that they were in the cluster and they rush to be vaccinated, not knowing if they already have the virus?
The issue
in other
about,
words,
sorry.
Yeah.
The issue about whether you are infected or not, whether you're having COVID-19 infection or having had it is not it's not a contraindication to getting the vaccine. You can get the vaccine no matter your COVID status. The issue before was the fact that when the UK came out with these guidelines, the concern was that if I'm having symptoms from COVID-19, right, and I go and take the vaccine, of course, there's an increase in infection risk of spreading it, one, but two, more importantly, when looking at the adverse reaction to the vaccine in terms of feeling unwell, they didn't want any confusion between the symptoms of a COVID-19 infection and the vaccine. Actually, subsequent to that, the studies have shown that if you had the virus before and you're subsequently vaccinated, the immune response is actually even higher. So that's not the concern. The concern was confusing symptoms of a recent new COVID infection with a vaccine reaction.
Okay, thank you. We go across to Felicia Hennis with Anguilla.
Hi again. Dr. Andrew, you talk about contact tracing. Is it difficult or is it easy? Are persons coming forward?
It's been a class. Persons are coming forward, are being called in, so persons are, some instances not as fortunate as we would like to be, but by and large, I think there's a lot of cooperation, right? So I think the contact tracing is going quite well. We've seen a large number of persons.
Okay, and we go across to Don Hodge.
Yes, let me unmute. So I have two questions. The first question is about the mask wearing. I understand you leave your house, you go shopping, you definitely have to put on a mask. Are you hearing me okay? I'm hearing feedback. Can you hear me? Hello?
Hello, Don, did I ask your question?
I'm going to continue. I was getting feedback. So the question is about masks, wearing a mask when you are outside of your home. My question about wearing a mask during our 90-minute exercise period, if we are outside on the beach, walking the dog, doing outside activities away from people, can we go maskless? That's my first question. And then my second question is, Dr. Andrew talked about the importance of people who need to be in isolation because they are positive. You know, the need for them to stay basically in lockdown. So I know when we had people coming in and they were in the bubble, there was a way of identifying that they were in the bubble because they wore arm bracelets. I realize that there's, you know, the privacy thing going on with people who are now positive on island, but is there some way that they will be identified inconspicuously so that if we see somebody out and about that should not be out and about, we would know to avoid them? Question. That's it.
Well, that's something we discussed with the team. That is a concern. We had started using the red bands, and we will continue to do so actually, because it should not be out and about. But as we're saying, the message is that nobody really should be out and about unless it's for very, very good reason. So there's that kind of default position. But yes, we have been putting the red bands on persons. Yeah. So what the sort of pause yesterday and today was the numbers of persons coming in to be screened, and we had to kind of sort of decipher and even do further interview. We're ratcheting up the screening, but further interview into who really fits the definition of the contact, and go from there, and then apply the bracelets to those persons. So that was the discussion around that.
Okay, so we go across to Abner Brooks of Class FM.
Good morning. Good morning. A question for Dr. Webster, maybe Foster. We spoke earlier about the borders for illegal re-entry to Anguilla as the root cause of this issue. Anything in the works to firm up the borders? We know we have a porous border between St. Martin. Any plans on the firming of the border, Dr. Webster?
Yes, that's a good question, and that is being done. The Royal Anguilla Police Force, the governor is responsible for border security and has been meeting with the commissioner and the special constables, and yes, that is being worked on and is ongoing at this point in time.
I would only add, and something that we've been saying for months. Remember, we had the Iron Dome operations, extremely expensive, excellent, borders are tight. We have said resources, right? Resources have limits. Back to what we were doing a few months ago is just tenable or sustainable, right? Not the way we did it. And this is why we're saying again, to come out of this thing is about vaccinating and protecting the country. You would note that Ireland had a little bit of protecting borders, but borders are always going to be closed to some extent. Always going to be that possibility of an illegal entry or an illegal re-entry, even a human trafficking, all kinds of things. Right? This is why we're saying when we're looking at serious measures to get us out of this pandemic, we're looking at vaccination. That is the immediate message of the day. It is not just a border issue. The resources in general to keep us the way we were for the past year will not be to that extent. It cannot be. It's not even possible. We're not meant to stay in this mode forever. The resources will just not allow it, right? So again, a message for vaccination to get this thing going forward so that we're protected.
So we go across now to Brenda Carter of the Herald newspaper.
Hello, good morning. You are saying vaccination is the order of the day, and I agree. What plans are there to make it easier for people to get vaccinated? Up to yesterday, although it was good to move to the football stadium because it was outside and people could sit, they still had to wait 3 hours and more. Are there any plans for having other places open so that people can get vaccinated more easily?
PS, you want to take that?
What I can say about that, yeah, it is more than about physical space. It's also about the human resources to get this done and get this done properly. As you can see, yesterday we were running full in terms of all of our staff out there. We still have to keep our hospital open. We still have to keep clinics open. So it's more than physical space. Some of it also has to do with human resources, and certainly we will look into it as much as we can. But as it is right now, we will try to, at a football stadium, we'll try to make it as easy as possible. And what we are doing now, we're changing some of the protocols at the site to ensure that persons for the second dose can come in and out rather quickly. So by next week, Monday, that should be a little less wait to get your stuff done.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have a question. Someone is concerned if she could be stopped and fined by the police for driving without a mask.
Yes.
I took that question to mean driving in the vehicle without a mask on.
Once you leave your home you need to have on your masks, because at the end of the day, people, you can never tell. There are different reasons why people may stop and pick up someone. You can never tell. Exposures. Once you leave your home, please put on your mask at this point in time. We don't want to get into these little intricacies and technicalities. Once you leave your home, let's keep it simple. Please put on your mask.
I got you. Okay. And then there was another question. If a citizen has information on persons entering Anguilla illegally, who should they contact?
Once anybody's breaking the law in terms of illegal entry, it should be reported to the police, immigration, customs. Those are the border control persons.
Okay. And Felicia from Anguilla had a question.
Just continuing on from Brenda in terms of the economy, either Dr. Webster, Mr. Rogers, how much has this set back the country? When you look at the numbers, what does it paint? How much has this set us back?
Well, do you mean from a tourism standpoint?
Pardon me?
I was going to ask if you meant from a tourism standpoint or just overall.
Oh, overall, but you can also chime in, Mr. Hughes, because what is the international word? We know CDC likes to issue travel alerts to travelers. So what is the word we are putting out there, since you have decided to chime in?
Well, I prefer the Permanent Secretary or Dr. Webster to answer to that question. But as it relates to travel, right now there have been perhaps hundreds of, not hundreds of thousands, but millions of dollars in deposits that have been handed back to visitors that will come into Anguilla over the next few weeks. It has really given us a tremendous blow to the hospitality sector, tremendous blow to our marketing and promotion, tremendous blow to our employment situation, tremendous blow to the treasury. So from a tourism and economic standpoint, this has been an astronomical blow. For those who are tasked with the health aspect to speak more to that, but I think it goes without saying.
Thank you.
Yeah, in terms of where we are, just before this, the 21st of April, the CDC had listed Anguilla in the level 3 category, which was not good. And that is before we had any clusters or community spread. So now with this, it would be tough to know what they will classify us as, maybe a 4, which is terrible. We were actually working on trying to get that classification reduced at the time that this occurred. In terms of the economy, we can see definitely the impact this has. It's limited persons coming in into its, we've basically had to halt the bubble concept. This still, persons are wondering, will we be able to make the July 1st opening that we had planned, where persons who are vaccinated for 3 weeks, fully vaccinated for 3 weeks, would not have to quarantine. We're still working on getting there, and it's only with the help of the people of Anguilla that we can do that. Persons staying at home, following the protocols. These are the things that are necessary to curb the spread of this virus right now and get us back to where we have no disease in the community, and also get us to a point where we can get back with the tourism industry. The finances, we know, last year we had to rely on the UK government to help us with monies to improve our healthcare system, monies to do border control. And we are at a point where, the government of Anguilla was having to pay for the special constables, pay for full health care. And that's where we are still. And so this has been a big setback financially in these times when we have limited resources. And so if you can think about it, just, the carelessness of a few people leads to this. And the country is small, and everybody is intertwined, and everything is interrelated. And we have to take responsibility, not only for our own health and for our own well-being, but we have to think about our brothers and sisters, our neighbors, and everyone that's around us, our elderly who are more susceptible. We have to make sure that we can get out there, get vaccinated, so that we can protect not only ourselves, but those around us, and get this country back to the good health status that it had. This is a public health emergency. This is of our own doing. And so that's the message I want to get out there. And we have done this to ourselves. And we were told that this could happen, and it has happened. And so please, I can only appeal to the people of Anguilla, who've always been responsible patriots and citizens. Let's get this done. Let's get past this. Let's get back to good health, and let's get this country back on track. I don't know if the PS has anything else to add. I know he's been pleading until he's lost his voice over the last 6 months that this could happen, and we were hoping that it didn't happen.
Yes, Premier. I don't know what else to say. I'm certainly from the risks. We assess the risks at the Ministry of Health. We do this every day. As I indicated, we do the scenarios, we crunch the numbers, we do the risk assessment, and this was the risk that we thought would be the most problematic. In fact, that is why the British government spent hundreds of thousands of dollars with Iron Dome to ensure there were boats on the water, there were planes in the air, there were people monitoring the beaches, there were special constables on the beaches at night, there were persons, just people who couldn't fish in the south, you couldn't fish in the north, and we got so much flack for a lot of the stuff we put in place, but we knew the risk, and I think what is happening now is a testimony to the fact that we couldn't control this risk forever, because certainly, as the Chief Medical Officer indicated, it was very resource intensive, and at some point Iron Dome had to come to an end. And as you can see, Iron Dome came to an end when it was February, March. Iron Dome came to an end recently, and this is where we are now. So we are where we are. We wish we couldn't be here. What I will say is that I think where we are on vaccination could be helping a bit. If we were not vaccinated at all, so far I have over 6,100 persons with the first dose, another 1,000 plus with a second dose. Out of that 6,100, we have 1,000 something of those who would have had the second dose. So I think we have some coverage, and I'm sort of buoyed by that, that we do have some level of protection in the community. We have to get our numbers up further. We've always indicated that our level of 70% is critical for us to have some, confidence that we can open up with some confidence, and we want to get there nonetheless. For those persons who have been vaccinated, both first and second doses, we want to thank you so much for your commitment to Anguilla. We want to thank you so much for your understanding and the part you have taken in the history of Anguilla, the part you have played in ensuring that we get back to some sort of stability. To those persons who have not yet taken any of the doses, either first or second, I want to implore you to take a look at it, to look at the evidence, to look at what is happening around the world, to see how important vaccination is, to see how we have taken it. We have seen, we have not grown extra arms, extra fingers, and we are happy that we are making the right decision. Dr. Aisha mentioned earlier that the UK has seen a precipitous drop in their cases. And there's a report that came out last night that indicated because of vaccination, COVID-19 is now an endemic situation in the UK. It is no longer a pandemic situation. And I want to explain the difference between endemic and pandemic. Pandemic is what it is right now, worldwide or regional spread of a virus or some sickness, impacting more than one community, more than one region, more than one country at the same time. An endemic is when something is localized, when it's impacting a country on a local level, a couple number of cases per year, or a level that's manageable. COVID-19 now is almost considered an endemic level in the UK, where this can be controlled. So we want to get to that point in Angola through vaccinations, where even if COVID were to pop in, it will be a case here and there. It will be endemic. It will go away. It wouldn't be spreading because we will have enough persons vaccinated. So we want to thank all those persons who have yet to vaccinate or are considering it, and those persons who have vaccinated already.
Okay. Thank you very much, Pastor. So we go first to DJ Hammer and then to Felicia. Abnabu?
Okay. We heard this morning some 37 positive cases, the latest count we have there, a pretty significant number. I'm wondering about our healthcare system, hospital in particular, our capacity there. I'm sure we thought about that. Any plans really in the event that it can go wrong? We know that 37 and counting. Is there a plan in place really as to how we can address this if it goes wrong?
Well, we've had a plan in place for over a year now. We've had an isolation unit, and we've also
Yeah, 10 beds there.
We've already given us that the numbers that would need hospitalization from this is no more than 2 to 3% of positive cases. So we figure that at one point in time, we will not need to hospitalize more than 5 or 6 or 7 persons if necessary. So we, like I said before, we crunch numbers on a daily basis. We look at risk, and certainly when we were setting up an isolation unit, we couldn't set up a unit that had 50, 60, 70 beds because it not only was prohibitive cost-wise, but it just didn't make sense. You have to look at what you can afford and to cover your risk. And certainly, out of every 100 persons who get COVID, the person who may need hospitalization is no more than 5 or 6 of them, if that many. So we have looked at the risk, and we have indicated that, most persons will be asymptomatic. Most persons who have symptoms can be managed at home. And those who need to come to the hospital, we will manage them with the current level that we have.
Again, the key, keep the numbers down. It's really a numbers game. Numbers go up, then we have much more to worry about. So we got to keep the numbers down. We have to contain this, and it's going to take everybody. Because one case on a ventilator is going to max us out in terms of the health system. With the 8 ventilators and 10 beds, you need resources to run those things. And we have to be realistic about where we are. We see in the developed countries, the health systems quickly overrun by too many cases. We have to keep the numbers down, and we need everybody to do that at this point in time.
Okay, so we go over to Felicia.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers, things have changed in a twinkling of an eye from Monday's press conference, and now we are here, and it seemed as if this only came to the forefront based on someone putting out that they were positive. Were any of these persons experiencing any symptoms before though?
I will let the Chief Medical Officer deal with that.
Yes, persons were experiencing symptoms. In addition to the person was first identified who called in because they were experiencing symptoms. And people have different reasons why they may or may not report their symptoms. So the short answer to that is yes. But through the action of one person, we were able to identify the situation that was occurring.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I have a question. Yes, so I have another question coming in. Could you get some further clarity on the mask wearing? So if you are driving in your car by yourself, you should be wearing a mask. Is that what is being said? Or only if you are picking up a passenger?
I'm asking people to please keep this simple. We are in the middle of a pandemic. This thing is spreading. I don't want to get involved in technicalities. Okay. If people want to, let's just keep it simple, please. We're asking people to let's cooperate. Please keep on your masks as soon as you leave your house. Let's get this done. At this point in time, I think we need to understand that this is a national emergency.
Yes, I got you. Okay. And we have a question. Does Anguilla have the same drugs that the UK has been using for hospitalized patients with COVID? These drugs have been shown to reduce the need for ventilators and improve survival rates.
We have dexamethasone, and that's been a game changer. That's a basic steroid that's been around forever. You don't want to get on a ventilator. Our message is about containing the situation. The simple answer to that is we have dexamethasone and not much else. It's going to be a referral overseas or whatnot if somebody gets really, really complicated. We don't want people going on ventilator in the first instance. So we're focusing on containment and prevention of spread and never being in a situation ever again by vaccinating the population.
What I will say as well, a lot of those treatments are experimental. A lot of some of those stuff is we just weren't able to get here. As you recall, there quite a bit of stuff that can be done with serum and all kind of stuff, and we don't have access to all of those things here. I will reiterate what the CMO has said. Let us control this stuff so there's no need to get on a ventilator.
Okay. Before we wrap up and go to the Premier for closing remarks, if there are no more questions, I would just like to thank the persons who participated this morning, especially the technical team, the guys from DITES, Ivan, Farah, and the others. Thank you so much for your technical assistance behind the scenes. Before we close off, I would like to give the closing words to our Honorable Premier.
Before we do that, I would just ask the PS or the CMO to, just give their final remarks before I finish up.
Thank you very much, Premier. We are at the point where we want to ensure that we do the right things, both at the Ministry of Health level with the public, to ensure that we curb the spread of this virus here. We would want to request the absolute support of the public. We would have worked very, very hard for the last year with Anguilla, health services, the public, people coming in the bubble and so forth. It is now our turn. I mean, the people of Anguilla must now realize that it's now the turn of the Anguillians to realize that this is something that must be stopped in its tracks. The question I asked earlier about wearing masks in cars, I really don't want us to get on that route, because there can be so many risks and iterations. Are you the only person that drives that car? Is there most people, other people in there with you? These type of things. We don't want to go down that route. Is the car used with other people when you're not in it? All kind of stuff. So let's please keep this simple and try to do the best we can to stymie this and get over this over the next 2 weeks. We know mask wearing is difficult. That is why we have not mandated for the last year. I mean, people who have been waiting for the last two days are already concerned about having to wear this stuff for 2 weeks. So that's why we didn't have a mask mandate in place, because we know that is the last line of defense. In fact, there are doctors and nurses who get infected with COVID wearing masks, wearing N95s, and we've had people who've come to Anguilla tested positive, and but they indicated to us that the only place they were was the grocery wearing an N95 mask. So these are not the end all and be all, but it is a way of reducing risk, and we ask people to wear them now. As you know, we always do things in a measured way. We in the Ministry of Health do not recommend anything that we think should not be recommended. So we are now recommending a mask mandate. We ask that we comply for the next 2 weeks initially, so we can get beyond this, so we can ensure that we get back to some state of normalcy. Finally, I'd like to thank all the persons who have stepped up and has helped in one way or another, whether it's through vaccination or whether it's through calling in and whether it's through assisting with letting us know where to look for stuff and these type of things. We want to thank you so much for the assistance and getting a handle on this. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the PS has said it all. I mean, I concur with everything that he said. We're exhausted. We've done our part. I'm a these not words kind of person. We just got to get this done. And I don't know how else to say it. I mean, these are the options. We put it out there, and we have to contain the situation. And the best way to protect ourselves going forward is through vaccination.
Yes, I think the CMO took the words right out of my mouth about vaccinating. Anguilla was the envy of the world. I mean, internationally, persons were following the protocols we were using. They were writing about Anguilla. We have become the enemy of our own success. For over a year, the Ministry of Health Authority, the Royal Anguilla Police Force, the Special Constables, Governor's Office, governor, past and present, this administration, we have, continued and put in place protocols which were there to keep us safe, and we were doing well. But we became complacent as a people, even though we were admonished continuously to be vigilant. And this is what's bothersome. The resources that were put into keeping this country safe, and by having the protocols which we put in place to allow the economy to come back some. We know we could never get back to where we were with the protocols we had, but we did have some economic activity, so it made it easier for our people to make a living. To those who needed the 1,000 EC dollars, which we know was never enough, but it could be supplemented. And here we are now because of our own carelessness. And that's all I can say as the leader of this country, that we have to blame ourselves for allowing this to happen. Now, but we still have a chance to save ourselves. And that requires that we be responsible, that we get vaccinated, all who are eligible. I know that there are some concerns about the safety, but we know that the risk is minimal compared to the disease and the symptoms and the long-term effects that this disease can cause. And so I'm asking persons to do this not only for yourself, but for the community. Do it for Anguilla. Let's vaccinate. We got the vaccines free from the United Kingdom. Let's use them. We will get more if we use these up. If we don't, then we won't, and then it might be too late for us to save this country. So I'm begging, I'm pleading, I'm asking that all of us, take responsibility and be as our forefathers and foremothers would have done, and look out for this country so that we can get on the right track again, so that we can get to that place where we're back to near normalcy, where COVID-19 is behind us. But we won't get there if we don't follow the regulations as they're stated. And, people can quibble about whether you should have the mask on in your car. The regulation says it's compulsory that if you leave your residence that you wear a mask. So just do it. It doesn't hurt you to do that if it's going to help. It doesn't hurt, for you to stay home unless you have to go out for a really essential reason. But these stories about persons wanting to be hanging out late at night and drinking at bars, even though we know that regulations say that bars and nightclubs should be closed, but persons want to just prove that they can break the law if they can get away with it. This is unacceptable. This is unpatriotic. This is un-Anguillan. And so I want to thank everyone who participated today in this press conference, but I want to send a message out that we are responsible for how this country goes over the next 2 weeks. Because if we don't do the right thing, then those pauses will have to continue until we get to a lockdown stage. And this country cannot withstand that health-wise or economic-wise. So I want to thank the Permanent Secretary of Health. I want to thank the Chief Medical Officer. I want to thank my ministers, ministerial assistants. I want to thank Minister Kenneth Hodge for hosting this program. I want to thank you, the media, for being here, for coming out on a Saturday, because you understand the importance of this session and getting the word out to the people. And again, thank Dites for doing all the technical work. And for anybody that I missed, again, I want to thank you all. And we'll continue to give updates. And those who are sick, I want them to get well. And certainly those who feel that they may have been exposed, call into the lines. And those lines, 476-7627 or 476-SOAP. Or 584-4263, that is 584-HAND, or visit the Facebook page or the website at www.beatcovid19.ai. we have to look out for each other. Thank you. May God bless you, and may God continue to bless Anguilla.